Hey guys, welcome. I'm Brandon, and my wife Nikki and I are working on a game called Samurado, where you play as an enraged avocado seeking revenge for the murder of his family. And the whole development process for this game has been extremely humbling. In the beginning, it was supposed to be a 3-month project, and here we are several months past that, still chipping away at it. And I also thought that somehow because it was a roguelite, that would make it easier to develop for whatever reason, and that has not been the case. And just like in the past, about midway through the development of this game, I have been finding that more and more I'm just not following a plan and just kind of endlessly puttering and noodling around and just tweaking things and not really making any meaningful progress towards the completion of this game. And I realized that somehow this always seems to happen halfway through a project without me even realizing it. It's really weird, and it seems to creep in very, very slowly, and it happens no matter what project I'm working on, as long as it's a long-term project. And I've spent some time trying to figure out what is going on here, because I know now the problem is not the genre of the game that I'm working on. The problem isn't that I'm working with a slow team. I only work with my wife and she pumps out art really fast whenever I ask for it. It's me. It has to be me. Something I'm doing or the way that I'm executing something has to be either just wrong or really, really inefficient. And I figured it out, guys. I think I know what the issue has been, and I have discovered a trick that has really, really been helping me with this problem, and we're gonna get there in just a minute. Now, I don't think you're gonna fully understand what I'm talking about until you've reached a certain point in your development process. When you first start a game, things come together at lightning speed, but the further you get in a project, it's like quicksand. It ends up sucking you in, and you get trapped in this cycle of just endlessly tinkering and polishing and noodling around. Adding more content, adding more depth, hoping that eventually, somehow, through some form of magic, it's all gonna come together and just be enough to be a complete game that you can publish. And planning is the obvious solution to this problem, right? And yes, planning is extremely, extremely important, but that's not actually where I'm going with this. I have tried planning, and I have tried planning in multiple ways, and it has helped me tremendously. But what I have found is that as soon as I fall behind schedule on something, it becomes very, very easy to stop relying on the plan. And I end up, again, without realizing it, kind of going off script and just working on my own thing. I don't know how it happens without me realizing it. It's like free will isn't even a thing. It's the strangest thing. And I really want to know down below, let me know if you can relate to that, or maybe it's just me. So how do you stop this from happening? If planning doesn't fix it, and you don't even realize that you're doing it, and you're either the only person working on your game or you're one of the only people working on your game, how is it ever going to get finished if you're constantly getting sucked into this vortex of inefficiency all the time? I really want to thank Unity, the sponsor of this video. I recently got a chance to play around with their remote desktop solution called Parsec. Parsec is built for work and play, enabling artists and game developers to access the power of their workstation from any PC, Mac, or even Android devices or browsers. It can handle streaming 4K at 60 frames per second with near zero latency. Getting it set up was as easy as installing the app on my computer, installing the app on Nikki's computer, hitting connect, and I was in. Parsec handles keyboards, mice, gamepads, and drawing tablets flawlessly. I hooked up a gamepad and it just worked, and it felt like I was working on my computer. And it did run really smooth, but I wanted to give this a proper test with a game that requires near zero latency in order to survive. And Hollow Knight was the perfect test for this. And it played really, really well. I had a lot of fun testing out Parsec. It's intuitive and simple, yet very powerful. If you want to try Parsec out for yourself, there's a link down below to start a free 14-day trial. Now, most of you watching this have probably participated in a game jam at some point, and if you haven't, you really should, because they're a lot of fun. I've participated in a few now, and with varying degrees of success in terms of how the game was received, but in all but one of them, I actually managed to finish the project. And that is the most incredible and terrifying feeling in the world, actually finishing your game and uploading it for other people to play. And that is what we're all shooting for here. And by the way, the one project that I didn't finish, it was a week-long game jam, and I read when the end date was, and I never wrote it down. I kept it in my head and just went off of memory, and then forgot the date and ended up missing the deadline. So that was dumb, and it's not a mistake I'm ever gonna make again. But my point is, every other time I actually ended up being able to submit a finished project. So what is the difference? What the is the difference? Because with our 3-month game Samurado, it had a deadline and we're nowhere close to the mark yet. But with game jams, whether it was a weekend, whether it was a week, whether it was a month, I've done all of those, I managed to actually finish. And yes, I know there are some details like game jams don't need to be as polished and they have much shorter deadlines, so it's a lot easier to not overscope. But I don't think that is what is important here. Is it maybe having a fixed deadline that doesn't move? If I just stopped moving our release date back and back and back, would I actually manage to finish the game? Maybe. I'm not entirely sure, but that sounds like a recipe for a lot of crunch time and potentially burnout. I think all proper development cycles need to be a little bit flexible in order to be realistic. So no, I don't think that's the problem either. So here it is. For me, the difference is I care. I care about the end result. I care way more with a real published game than I do about a game jam game. And that difference it's huge. It's monumental. Caring about the end result and how it's received and what it looks like, I've realized is one of my very biggest problems. I have to admit, there is an entitled, childish part of me that really wants to be like Team Cherry, the designers behind Hollow Knight, or like Eric Barone, the designer behind Stardew Valley, where the very first game that they ever published was a worldwide success. It just took the world by storm. And if I make a game in 3 months and I rush to meet my deadlines, it's probably not going to be another Hollow Knight. It's probably not going to be another Stardew Valley. And whether or not you should be working on those types of projects that take many years to work on is a topic for a totally different video. But I think ultimately I'm afraid that my game is going to be just another game in a sea of games, and it's going to be forgotten about in a matter of days. So I think some subconscious part of me is taking control, it's taking the wheel, and it's finding ways to stall to protect myself, essentially. I'm working, but I'm not really working. It's actually brilliant if you think about it. I could tinker with a game for decades and always be working on it, but never actually release it. And if you've worked on a game for long enough, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So how do we fix this? How do we center ourselves so that we're always grounded and working towards something meaningful? How do we keep ourselves focused on the end goal? Well, let me ask you this question. If the game that you're working on right now wasn't your idea, it's your employer's, and they just hired you to make their idea, would you still care about the end result the same way you care about your project? Probably not. I know that I would not feel the same way about it. It's just a job which is made up of X number of tasks before the job is completed. So the trick that I've been using, which I find extremely helpful, and you do it as often as you need, even set an alarm on your phone every hour if you need to, but every once in a while you check in with yourself and you pretend you're showing your manager what you've been working on. Hey boss, here's what I've been working on today. And he's probably going to be like, why are you working on shaders and particles when you're supposed to be working on a new enemy today? Seriously, what is the job of a manager? It is to manage employees. Your boss should know what you were working on yesterday, what you're working on today, and what you're going to be working on tomorrow, and how long you need to finish this project. If unexpected bumps happen along the way that make things take longer than expected, no worries, go tell the boss and then get back on track. This simple little shift in your perspective can relieve you of a lot of stress and anxiety. When you are the creator, the end result of that product says a lot about you. Are you smart enough to finish a game? Are you creative enough to make that game fun? Are you determined enough to actually finish it? It's a lot of pressure, and very few people work well under that kind of personal pressure. But just a couple of times a day, or however often you need to, just check in with yourself and pretend that you're explaining to your boss what you're working on that day. You're working on a game for him, not for you. I am not saying that this should change your work output or that you should put less care or attention to detail into anything. Not at all. I'm simply saying change your mental perspective here and there, because it can drastically reduce the pressure you feel and reduce the stress that you're experiencing from working on such a massive project. I'm finding it really fascinating to realize from my own experience of making games that a big part of the process is just finding different ways of building mental discipline. That's all I got, guys. Like the video if you liked, and let us know of any additional tips that you have down below. And if you like this kind of content, we drop a video like this every single Monday, so hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. I want to give a very special thank you to all of our Hall of Fame patrons: Jakob Yondok, Christopher Nichols, Sandra Kessler, Fontaine Waite, Brainwaves to Binary, Couch, KB at Bird Tech Games, and Ian Oral, as well as our early access patrons: Ken Waite, Mason Crow, Mr. D, Liquid Egg, Alexander Prestis, Jude Greaves, Felipe Gomos dos Santos, Ober, Francesco Latamata, Bill Guo, Alon on Mars, Alex Friedman, Danny Rathliff, Neil, Ben Kerberger, Lucky Tales, Aiden Serve, Adarsh Kumar, Merler, Anastasia Shamalina, and Petter Juricek. If you choose to support us on Patreon, you can get early access to all of our YouTube videos, monthly alpha builds, and more.